Hello, everybody. It's AJ returning once again to the Nine Hells, and this time I'm going to take some time to talk about the actual environment of Avernus. This is the surface layer of the Nine Hells, the surface of this weird planet. As we know, it's very volcanic and classically hell-like. It's a blasted landscape. However, this doesn't mean that it's necessarily devoid of natural life. It was once a planet with a thriving ecosystem that fell to a cosmic disaster and was then later claimed. So it was once a viable prime material plane, which was then locked off as a subdimension completely under the control of Asmodeus and populated with the former primevals who were battling demons. And it's basically become the surface of the world is the first place that you visit when you enter the Nine Hells. Is no other direct means of accessing the lower planes. You have to come in through Avernus. And although there may be exceptions to this rule in your game, this is the classic literature. And it has lots of interesting features. The primary feature of interest is the Bronze Citadel, which is a massive, ever expanding structure, which is part palatial palace, part doom temple of torture, and most part, is massive barracks and staging grounds for the armies of devils, the armies of the Nine Hells. And the plains around the Bronze Citadel is a huge staging ground and exercise area, essentially, for devils so that they can train to fight demons. So imagine that this is a devilish and demonic danger room where all sorts of horrific things can be summoned and put into play, where the armies of devils practice their tactics constantly, fighting all manners of aberrations and horrors that would pour out of the abyss. So you will see things like mock-ups of Tarrasques and dragons, legions of dragons, and all sorts of like flotillas of beholders and slards and all sorts of captured demons which they've brought down to the Nine Hells, which they are practicing on fighting against. So you'll have, all sorts of things that are going on there that seem very, very confusing and very chaotic, but in actual fact, it's highly regimented and disciplined training maneuvers for the armies of hell. So that's one of the few places on Avernus where you will find all kinds of devils. For the most part, the rest of the plane is restricted to a few main groups of devil types, and that is, of course, the lemures. The most of the surface of Avernus has got at least a few lemures creeping around, eking out a meager existence of pain and torment, and just basically trying to avoid the notice of their superiors, the devils that surround them. Then, of course, you've got the Erinyes, and yeah, I looked up, that's the pronunciation of Erinyes. These are closest, really, to what the primordials looked like when they first fell into the Nine Hells. So they actually look very angelic, and they prey upon the mistake that most mortals make, that because these are good-looking humanoids with feathered wings, they think they're angels, when in actual fact, they are definitely not. They predate the existence of angels. Most of their years have been around since the very dawn of creation and the Dawn War. They are incredibly ancient beings for the most part. And of course, it's one of the aspirations of imps and spined devils to rise up to become Erinyes. But they have to have a specific set of qualities, which is mostly martial skill. And Erinyes are incredibly skilled warriors that fight in the classic sense of the classic means that the primordials first fought against the demons. So they wear armor, and they have wickedly poisoned blades that create weakening wounds, and they are quite adept at harrying foes from the air and on the ground. And yeah, they really like it. They love combat, and are constantly at work honing their skills. And most of the politics of the Erinyes is against each other, rising in their own internal ranks to become the most capable um, master of any particular weapon that they pick up. And their entire society is martial and built around that pride and their combat abilities. Um, Unlike something like a succubus or other sort of winged humanoid that looks good, they're not really interested in seduction. That would be a huge mistake to make. Um, they are really only interested in a challenging foe that can better their combat abilities. So they will seek out to fight the most martially capable beings in the universe that they can, even at the risk of death in the outer planes. However, they probably will only engage in combat against foes that they know they can beat while on the plane of Avernus, because they can actually die permanently in the Nine Hells. So typically they won't fight to the death because it will weaken the army overall, and they do have a mandate from Asmodeus that they must survive and become capable members of the armies of the Nine Hells. So they don't typically fight each other to the death, to utter destruction on the Nine Hells. If they did that, the victor would very quickly come a cropper of Asmodeus himself, and that is something they don't want. Of course, you have tons and tons of imps and spined devils. Now, the spined devils are the upgrade of the imp. That's basically what the imp is going to turn into if it doesn't prove itself better. And they are the messengers of the Nine Hells and all sorts of beings, and very, very capable spies. And they're information brokers, so they're not really to be underestimated that much. They are a definite upgrade from the imp. They have the same capabilities of the imp, and in the armies of the Nine Hells, they have the ability to firebomb terrain. So they have the ability to devastate forests and all sorts of cover that is flammable by using their tail spines to pelter the area with essentially incendiary grenades. That's what their spines on their tails are capable of doing. They detach, hit the ground, and explode. And they will burn like phosphorus anybody that they sink into on contact. So they're quite devastating, really. They don't do a lot of damage, but if you imagine you have a cloud of thousands of these things, they could firebomb entire cities, to the point where, lead guttering is melting and running on the streets, much like Dresden. Okay, so the ruler of the Nine Hells is Asmodeus, and they have quite a large hierarchy of pit fiends and the generals of the armies and things. There's a lot of crossplay between their prominence as strategic military leaders and their favor with Asmodeus. So because they've been engaged in the Blood War, and because the Blood War is so important for the overall survival of devil kind, because without the Blood War, they essentially wouldn't have the pact with the gods, which allows them to be independent. And they wouldn't have access to the souls, which give them divine power to reform creation. So for them, it's all about continuing the Blood War so that they can be independent and not live under the heel of the gods, to have their own way. And Asmodeus values this detachment and freedom above all else. So, yeah. So one of the leadership of Avernus has shifted between Zariel and Bel. These are two pit fiends who. Bel is a very, very capable general. He's a strategic mastermind who has the respect of all of the other pit fiends, and was once a member of the Dark Eight, which is a cabal of pit fiend generals who lead legions and legions of other devils. And it's his strategic mastery that gave him favor with Asmodeus. However, he regarded as someone who will turn on his superior in order to advance himself. So he's not trusted and doesn't have a lot of alliances amongst the other leaders of the Nine Hells. There's a lot of infighting amongst them, of course, to jockey for Asmodeus' favour and gain more power themselves, because more power means more freedom and more independence and less people telling you what to do. And Zariel is the current leader of the Nine Hells because of the politics between Asmodeus and others. And Zariel is a female pit fiend. I'm not entirely sure how that works out, but she's pretty much the only one in literature I've noted which is definitely a female pit fiend. So yeah, that's just a quirk of her nature, I suppose. I don't think gender really has a lot to do with the reproduction of pit fiends per se. It's just a personal preference of that pit fiend to be female. Anyway, it makes for an interesting story plot and role playing that character for sure. Okay, so Zariel is currently ensconced in the Bronze Citadel and doing her thing, and the other sort of environment, you've got lots of features of Avernus, which I don't see listed a lot elsewhere. So you've got the wastelands, the realm of Drukhari, the wormlands, the plains of carnage, the nether reaches, the maggot pit, the city of Desolus, city of Darkspine, the city of Baneholm, and the Tower of High Sorcery, city of Abathaloin, and the dragon pits of Azarul. You've got the Pillar of Skulls, which is just before the entrance to the Lair of Dis. And the Pillar of Skulls is a massive edifice over a mile high, constructed purely of skulls of all sorts of different creatures. Right down the base of it, of course, is very ancient prehistoric creatures, and it's constantly added to by imps who build upon this thing day after day after day. And it's truly epic in size and scope and terrifying to witness. As you approach this thing from miles away, you can see it reaching up into the red sky. And as you approach, you realize it is a tower of skulls, the size of a mountain, well over the size of a mountain. That seems incongruous. It seems that gravity could not support such a thing. It would collapse under its own weight as it's constructed of bone. But no, true, there it is. There is a strange place called the Peaceable Lands, and that's bordered by the River Styx and the Blood River, which is one of its tributaries, which leads from Nibelin and Sujaril. There's a city called the Ribcage, which sounds exactly like it is, and the Darkspine city. This is by the Sigmaris Mountains, and yeah, so there is all sorts of stuff, environments on the plane of Avernus. It is a land without seas, but it has lakes and rivers of magma. Really, the only sort of water sources around are the River Styx and the Blood River. And they, of course, are highly toxic. I certainly wouldn't recommend drinking them. So if you were in hell, there is no water to drink. There is no food to eat, which is not tainted in some way. The entire place is not very pleasant for a living being to visit. And you would need to carry all of your supplies with you. So living in hell is almost an impossibility without some sort of outside aid or some sort of replenishing magical artifact that can produce water and food. Otherwise, you will quickly perish within a matter of a few weeks. If you have food, of course, you're going to live for a while, but without water, you will quickly perish in a matter of a week or so. The environment is mountainous, rocky, cavernous. There's all sorts of caves and caverns and things. The place has been extensively worked over millions of years by all of the denizens of the Nine Hells, and all of the martial efforts and things have built all sorts of mock cities and ruined towers and terrain that mimics a lot of the other terrain in the Nine Hells. So you'll have mazes and things and places that look very organic. You'll have forests of imported exotic trees, all of which are poisonous and quite nasty. So there'll be basically a hell terrain of jungles of carnivorous plants that are constantly seeking things to tear apart and nourish themselves. So Venus flytraps of nightmarish proportions. You'll have places which mimic aberrant terrain, so places where the rock is porous and you can worm your way through it, or places where the rock is actually sort of phased out, semi-phased out, so you can move in and out of things that feel like solid matter or appear as solid matter. You'll have terrains which automatically, spontaneously manifest illusions of different types of terrain to confuse the senses, and laid out with traps and things like that, pits and spine traps and kissing maidens and that sort of thing. You'll have desert environments that are very, very hostile. And there's also a lot of small pockets of elemental incursion, such as frozen areas or muddy areas or sulfurous bogs, that sort of stuff. Typically, though, none of these places are very pleasant to live, and maybe you could eke out an existence of sort of getting some water out of a muddy elemental incursion and selling it at great cost to other people who need water to survive. But it's very nasty. I mean, the insects that fly around are poisonous. And the size of your hand. There are rock worms with magma for their insides. There's giant bats that tear your head off just on a flyby attack. The place is full of things which are extremely nasty, and they need to be so to survive, and they need to be completely predatory and seize any opportunity to tear things apart, particularly any mortal morsels that may happen across their path. Um, so yeah, that's Avernus for you. I won't get into the great politics of things. Oh, I will mention that Tiamat does have her own realm. That's the Wormlands, and she has many little offspring, which are called Abishai, which are kind of like uh, imps in a way. They're larger, they're more sort of medium sized, like diminutive dragonborn, really, and they mimic the chromatic colors of Tiamat. And each have different natures according to the color that they are, similar to dragons have different natures. If you want to explore that further, just check out my videos on the dragons for more of their personality types. And they're more like the draconians of Dragonlance in a way. And there's a lot of them in the Wormlands. So if you are going past the Citadel of Bronze and the City of Desolus, past the Maggot Pits, towards the Pillar of Skulls, you will come across Tiamat's hordes, because that is through the Wormlands that you'll be traveling. And yeah, and the Dragon Pits, of course, where she lives. So yeah, it's an environment, it's a world in and of itself that you can have all sorts of adventures in, and every time you visit there, if you so wish, you could go to a completely different place, and it be quite a different impression of what hell is like. Um, and in further videos, I'll talk about different environments that you can go to in the Nine Hells, and talk about the denizens that live there as a sort of ecology. So if that's of interest to you, just let me know, and I'll carry on with specific devils in this series as we go. Thanks for listening.